On July 5th, 1970, an Air Canada flight leaving Montreal bound for California had a stopover in Toronto. That plane went down and all 109 passengers and crew died in that crash. And amongst them was a mother and 2 young daughters. And here today I have Lynda Fishman, the one that survived. You weren't on that plane, Lynda, but that day you lost almost everything.
I certainly did.
Yeah. Now, your father and you were still in Montreal at the time, or you were in California already?
I was in California. They were coming to California because we were going to be celebrating a family function, and we were supposed to spend a month there, so I was already there.
I guess you were 12 at the time? 13. What was it like for you at that moment when you learned that your mother and your daughters and your sisters were never going to be there again?
Well, it didn't really hit me at the beginning because we were in California on California time, so we were woken up by a phone call at about 5 a.m. So for me, it was just an ongoing nightmare for the first few days because I couldn't believe that I was actually awake and experiencing this. But as the days and weeks went on and the reality hit me, it was beyond description. And there was no professional intervention, no help available to us. We just had to figure out how to deal with this terrible tragedy on our own, which is so different than the way things are handled nowadays.
I know, and so that leads me to this incredible book, Repairing Rainbows. It's your story, Lynda, but so much of it, I think, people can relate to in their own lives. So it is, I guess, finding the answers and getting yourself back on track. Your journey, was there a single moment, Lynda, or were there several moments where you knew that I want to live?
Well, first of all, I want to tell you that you're absolutely right. The story is not even mine anymore because every single person experiences loss, and really it's a story about loss and how to move forward after loss. And there was not a single moment, but there were many moments where I watched my father, who was just existing, and I decided that I couldn't live that way. He was so unhappy and so broken, and I wanted to be happy again. And so I came up with my own strategies, lack of any professional intervention, and figured out how to move forward in a positive way and how to find joy again. And when I look back and when I wrote the book, I actually was able to put my strategies down on paper and share them with others so that I can make a difference in the lives of other people who are faced with loss or grief. And that's what's happening.
I know, and but that must have been so hard, though, too, because you'd have to go back almost and relive everything again.
It was treacherous because the way I dealt with it back then was I didn't do the grief work. I found other ways to distract myself and focus on helping other people and take the focus off myself, which got me through many years. But when I actually started to write the book and really did the grief work and stood in that fire again, that's when I really felt the pain and worked it out in a different way, in a much healthier way. A couple of years ago, I couldn't even talk about this. I just never mentioned it and didn't talk about it. Now I talk all over the country, telling my story and giving people hope and inspiration that you can survive and thrive after a tragedy.
And you certainly have. I mean, you have a loving husband, you have a family. You just told me you're going to be a grandma. And I mean, proof in the pudding that you can have a full life. It's interesting, though, reading about near the end of the book, and you're going to like a spiritualist. Mm-hmm. That crosses over. I mean, what was that like?
That was life-changing for me because I always believed and felt like they were still around me. Mm-hmm. But those are the kinds of thoughts that we think only crazy people have. And so finally going to a medium and having her validate for me that they may not be here in real life, but they always do stay around us as angels, or whatever way you want to put it. Was so comforting and so life-changing. And now when I get signs and messages that they're around, I acknowledge them, and they're incredibly comforting and motivating for continuing on with happiness. And people who are struck with tragedy always feel guilty about being happy again. And really what the people on the other side want more than anything is for us to be happy and to move on with our life in a happy way. So I'm so thrilled that I had that experience and that I can share it with others.
Wow. Now, I guess present day in your life with your children, I know that we always reflect on our parents and what our parents taught us. And I know that, you had a difficult relationship with your father after the tragedy. But the values, the core values that your mother gave you and your dad gave you, how have you sort of made it Lynda's and Barry's values for your children?
Well, I really credit my first 13 years of life and learning from my parents for everything that I have accomplished in my life now. And a big part of those values was making a difference in the lives of others and helping others. And Barry and I share very similar values, and our children, thank goodness, haven't had the same experiences, but they are always looking for ways to make a difference in the lives of others. So I do believe that those first 13 years were a strong foundation, and I always tell people, don't ever underestimate the impact you have in those first 13 years or first few years of your child's life. You're giving them very strong messages through your actions about what's important.
Yeah. And a last question, I was just, as you were talking, because you've gone through this tragedy, you lost your mother at a young age, is there ever a scary feeling that you might go before all your work is done as a mother?
You know, I used to be terrified and always looking over my shoulder for when tragedy was going to hit again and when my kids were going to have to go through the same thing that I went through and lose me. But I also know that we can choose our thoughts. And I now make a very conscious effort when those thoughts do enter my mind to change those thoughts, because why would I want to go there? That doesn't feel good, and it's not working for me. So I'd much rather change my thoughts and stay optimistic and positive. And it takes work, but I really do work on staying positive and optimistic and sending those thoughts off to somewhere in space, because I don't want to deal with those kinds of thoughts.
Oh, well, words of wisdom I think that we should all take to heart. The book is called Repairing Rainbows. Thank you so much, Lynda Fishman.
Thank you.
All the best and a happy life.
Thank you. The same to you and to everyone. Happiness, happiness, and joy.
For Backstage 30, I'm Tracy Koga.